ultimately the ground state of how you beat a complex is to make it irrelevant in the immediate moments and particularly in the future.
Hi everyone. If you've seen some of our Jung To Live By videos before, then you might be familiar with this schema. Genome, gene expression, instinct, drive, affect, ego. As a systems-based approach, the energy and information at each broad, discrete stratum within a given context, though of course simplified, must have been present, in potentia or otherwise, in all the ones that came before it, as defined in terms of chronology. As complexes, acquired through interaction with the environment over the lifespan, are downstream of instinct, we can state with confidence that their source of energy and the template for their information arises from instinct. In today's Jung To Live By video, taken from a high-level second-year IPSA professional training seminar, Steve and Pauline were asked a question pertaining to this schema. In creative therapies, such as dialectical imagery, a huge bandwidth of instinctual information is released, which powers forward towards the ego. It is felt in the form of affect. Complexes will, metaphorically, collapse this bandwidth of information into their own state, in order to justify themselves. However, is the same necessarily true of the self-concept? Is it perhaps true that the self-concept instead has a choice with what to do with this affect form of energy and information? That is, it can collapse it down into its own understanding, or it can instead feed back a hypothesis to make a plan for the future. Indeed, this question is highly nuanced, and as a result, it allowed Steve and Pauline to speak to the nature of spontaneous, that is, independent ego consciousness, reorganization of the self-concept by an internally generated symbol, that is, by instinct, as well as the core of the model with respect to the most efficient way of dealing with complexes. This involves an exegesis on the latent source of all potential within the genome, and some nuances around the purpose and dynamics of memory. We really hope that you enjoy.
So much, and we know this from Milton Erickson, so much can happen in a compressed symbolic way, that when the right symbol reaches consciousness, that in and of itself unpacks and releases a reorganizing principle, say within the self-concept, and the person then will just change. There's been no conscious attachment to it. It's been implicitly identified with that which is emerging. This is a really good question, by the way, thank you. But that which emerges from within in a compressed file in the form of a symbol then enters into association with the ego, into the self-concept, and unpacks itself and starts to arrange and rearrange the self-concept in anticipation of the future being different. And what you find then is a person just simply feels better. That's how it happens. You know, I feel better. I'm no longer depressed. I just have this impulse in a relaxed way to go and do something. That's the ego speaking about the fact that it's being rearranged outside of its immediate awareness, but within the self-concept. And the identified complexes lose energy in so much as this released energy that's coming in, and released associations based on the wide construct of an instinct or more, one or more instincts, are literally stripping the ego identified complexes of their libido and of their capacity to hold the individual back. So that would be the technical model for how we get that result, that observed result, if that's what you're asking. Yeah.
Yes, and then would that also underline the value of the self-analysis, is because the self-analysis would allow of like sort of a chunking for the ego, also for the chunking of the past into a concept that's more closely associated to be manageable through the Miller number.
Yes, and that's a really, again, a really good way of doing it. Because then when the reflexivity of the self-concept, that part which is close at any one time to the immediate focus of the Miller number, because that feels better, then action in the world is reinforcing for that. Then that forms that nice loop which feeds back into itself, and the person again feels better by action in the world, feels better within their self-concept. And then meanwhile, the reaction deeper down in memory is that we would say, and Mark might not say, but we would say, because it's psychodynamic, that formally automatized patterns will be spontaneously rearranged, resorted, reallocated, and become less dynamic. So aligned complexes will resort themselves, they will move away and become flattened out. Non-aligned ones will behave themselves because the system has achieved homeostasis. And the homeostasis will be determined by the instinctive instructions, which will in effect be the governing principle made manifest in the moment for that individual's behavior. The governing principle is basically that which regulates the entire system. But this is on a timed release. If you don't want me digressing a little bit, Paul and I were talking, we were watching some people last night, weren't we, about how these things arrange themselves, that there's a general lack of understanding about how systems regulate. And if you can imagine a newborn child, that newborn child has the adult within them, not the final form, because the final form of the adult is dependent to some extent on interaction with the environment. That will include nutrition, and it'll include learning, it'll include complexes, all of that, but pretty much most of it is anticipated. But the child is not the adult, but everything that is necessary for the adult is in the child. It's latent and it's not released. It's not made available. It's there, but it's not available. Adult sexuality is inborn in the child, but is not released. It's not made available. It requires the clock. It requires the time release homeostatic mechanism to say now, and it releases. And the gene expression means hormones are released, other things are released, behaviors are released, but they haven't come from the environment. They are latent, but not available. Because if a child was born with full-on adult sexuality, it would not be a child, but it is there. It doesn't have to be put in there. And when you listen to a lot of the arguments from Jungians and others, sadly, who interpret Jung, they tend to fall in this polarity that either everything is there or everything's in the environment. And the one thing that they seem to miss is this issue of normal biological timed release development and the anticipation that must be born into the genome that this will happen in stages and will be released. So that's really important. Now, when it comes to complexes then, if there's been an inhibition of timed release expectation from instinct and energy, available libido to act in the world that's been capped by complexes, then when that is removed because of the process, for example, that you've described, and the self-concept updates and acts in the world, there will be a corresponding release, a further release from the genome via gene expression, which will make sure that that run, that path is now clear and open, and people will act effectively in the world. But you very often see people late in life, for example, or later in life, suddenly develop talents that they never knew they had. They say, I never knew I did that. I haven't learned to do this. It's just come out from me. And of course, the response is it was always there, but something inhibited its release. And it's not just a psychodynamic inhibition. The inhibition, when it occurs, the blockage, say from complexes, will actually affect gene expression.
Yes.
And when that's removed, you'll find talents appear. Some people learn art, or they just express it. I had a talent for art, and I never knew it, or music, or writing, or an athlete. I never knew I could do that. And it's like, well, nobody told me I could. Yeah, so the learning wasn't right for you, so the triggers weren't there, but it was latent within you, and that talent was latent at birth. And then it's the interaction between the gene and the environment that produces the state the biopsychosocial profile at any one time for any one of us. So it is very, very dynamic.
Yes, and apart from my own observations with that recently, in regards to having, like, for example, a patient who has been on this lagging, like who has a lagging bandwidth of that. So like something has been suppressed for a couple of years or maybe decades. It seems or more, maybe that's a question. It seems that the prerequisite then it comes again from the ego strength to being able to handle all that affect that's being put up. And is there a question, because complexes will access memory and we can be reflexive about memory, is this then also like a position where complexes can produce false memories? And how would one be able, well, in hypnosis we would be able to probably to limit that, but can we limit that in itself in a way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's almost impossible to find out how much of a given memory is a true reflection of the original experience and how much of that has been reprocessed to make sense of later experiences and how much of it may be a fabrication based on a complex. So if we accept that, then what we must do is bypass that. If we come across an obstruction that we can't solve, except by imposing a fantasy of our own onto it, which I would never recommend to do, then we go around it. We say, okay, there's this impression and we don't know whether it's right or not. Let's just ask a higher authority what needs to be done now. And that again is our clinical empiricism. And when we've done that and we've asked what is needed now for the future rather than what is needed in the past, the cooperation tends to come through, because it seems that the genome is interested in the passage of time. It is interested in that biological clock. It is not interested in regression and in going backwards. Complexes are. Complexes are always interested in the past because they always formed in the past. And the justification for their existence is always in the past. But the genome anticipates lifespan development, so it's interested in the future. So immediately we have a polarity. Do we go with the complex and be drawn into the past and fixed there? Or do we go to the genome and say, what do we need to do now? And the genome will agree with us more than the complex if it's given the opportunity to make that agreement. So if we can then collaborate with the genome, we can bypass the complex and not bother to have to go through all of that. But
Yes.
people, when they come in, generally say something awful happened when I was a child, and I can't remember what it was. And a lot of Jungians will dig a trench, put on the tin hat, and wait for a 4-year war or whatever of attrition while they try and wear down the complex. I think that's all unnecessary. Let's just go around the conflict and not bother to have the fight. Because there is a part of a person that wants to be healthy because we're born with the intention that we will be. That's the anticipation. You immediately get the instincts on your side because we're thinking in the future. And every instinct is concerned with the future, not the past. Every physiological instinct that Mark Solms talks about with Jaap Panksepp, their 7 basic emotional instincts are not about the past, they're about the future. The immediate moment, yes, in order to gratify in the future and to maintain survival in an ongoing sense, all of them. And all of those other kinds of instincts, which are not reducible to those 7 basic ones, but which we know are there on empirical grounds, again, the much bigger, wider contextual instincts, if we go to them, they are all concerned with the future too. So that's ultimately the ground state of how you beat a complex, is to make it irrelevant in the immediate moments and particularly in the future. They will try and pull you back. Their inertia is to go backwards all the time.
If you enjoyed this video and want to continue your study of psychosystems analysis, then check the description for links to further resources, including our Discord server, our suite of educational handbooks, and our application page for professional training under Steve and Pauline Richards, leading to accreditation as a hypnotherapist and psychotherapist. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next video.